Will this work? Let's try it again. Every Thursday we try to learn something from the holy Rebbe Levi Parshas Bemidbar. It's the first Torah reading in the book of Numbers. Still working? I don't know why Safaria started over again. And we're trying something a little bit different because I see that we get more views. We do live streams, even post a live stream, then uploading, even with all the edits. We're trying to do maybe some in-camera edits like we just did. But here we are, Parshas, and I'm sorry, it's the vertical orientation, though. That's how we got to do it. So, Se'us Rosh B'nei Yisrael it says in the book of Numbers, lift up the heads of the children of Israel according to their families, according to their patriarchal houses. It's called and the entire congregation gathered on the first day of the second month. Yisyaldu al mishbechosam leveis avosam, and they gave birth, or they gave proof of their birth according to their families, according to their patriarchal houses. So Bemidbar, that's the book of Numbers, chapter 1, verse 2 and verse 18. There's Rashi's also. Rashi explains like this: Visyaldu heviu sefer ichusehem. So what does it mean that they gave birth, like they gave proof of their birth? It means that they brought their ancestral records, the family tree. Li nira, it appears to me, the Farsh Kapshu, that we could explain this in the simplest way, although right now I'm in a pretty scary place, very narrow, next to a truck, and now so this is pretty scary stuff right now where I'm driving. Driving on the highway is the safest time to be doing this, but all right, it got a little safer now. That's the excitement of these live streams, right? It appears to me the first Pshuta Yisyaldu Lashon Leda, that they gave birth means they literally gave birth. Ki yadua hu she'umas ha'olam misyachsim acher imam l'kein nikru l'umim. It is known that the nations of the world have their ancestry go after their mothers, and that's why they're called, the nations are called by the term l'umim, which is usually, like in modern Hebrew, it's called like nationalism is referred to this, but it's different than which is the people or community or group, probably related to the cognate in a way, meaning we got it first, but they preserved the meaning maybe a little better. In this case, like the Muslims speak of their community as the Ummah, and I believe that's the Ummah with the ayin, but it could be with Alif, I'm not sure. Oh, but I know that they call their religious community the Ummah, meaning a kuffar is not part of the Ummah, right? But I could be wrong. Maybe it is with Alif. I'm not sure. Again, I don't know Arabic. Maybe one of our Arabic scholars here could correct me. But in any event, that's more in line with what the Am Yisrael is it's a religious community, not in the 1890s, nationalism, the way that the Zionists believe. But anyway, it's a fascinating thing to read this, because what does it mean the nations of the world have their ancestry after their mother? We are always told, oh, but if your mother's Jewish, then you're Jewish. But that's not really what it means. But rather, if your mother is not a Gentile, then you're not a Gentile. that is really more accurate, because to be part of the Klal Yisrael is a religious idea, as opposed to not being one of the other nations, right? But we have, really three statuses. There's the Gentile, which is most of the world. There's nothing wrong being a Gentile. And then among people whose mothers are not Gentiles, right, or converts to Judaism, proper converts, you have two types of people. You have Jews, and then you have heretics, apostates, non-Gentiles, whether quote-unquote born Jewish, meaning born to a Jewish mother or born to a non-Gentile mother, or converting and then reverting. It's the same law, that they are bound by the laws, and they're bound by the oath that they took if they're converted, or the oath that their ancestors took at Sinai. So anyway, and the whole idea here is that in certain communities, certain pagan communities, certain non-Abrahamic communities, I would say, paternity is not really well established, right? The way that it is in the Abrahamic communities. Jewish, Christian, Muslim communities have a big care about paternity, mostly because they also have a big care about avoiding incest, meaning this is a teaching of the Abrahamic religions rooted in Judaism that incest is wrong, as opposed to the old pagan communities. They didn't care, or they even, that was part of their religion. In Egypt, the pharaohs often were products of incest and practitioners of incest, and that was seen as sacred in ancient Egypt. That's how disgusting that community was. But the point is, if you don't know who your father is, then you don't know who your brother or your sister are, right? And if you don't know who your father is, then your sister doesn't know who her father is, there's a possibility you could marry your sister, right? And so that's why paternity is ultimately, in the utilitarian sense, so important. Of course, there's the ethical aspect of being a responsible father and so forth. But that it's in a way that's secondary to the more utilitarian aspect, which again, in other cultures, they did not believe that. And again, the question always comes up about multiculturalism. What point do we put a foot down and say, no, this is disgusting and this is wrong, And then what often happens, though, is people will falsely accuse pious communities of violating the most fundamental aspects of basic ethics and so forth, because they like to take the text out of context, and it's really not about the text. It's really just about hating people from that community, from our community. It happens a lot. And it's painted in a way of, some piety when it's actually just lies. And that's a different thing, for a different story for a different time. We're still recording. Everything's all right. We're for 9 minutes now. All right. So we had that intro, whatever it is. Nobody's watching though. Masha, I don't know how good the connection is. I'm driving, so that could be an issue too. Masha Ein Kinamu Yisrael is Achar Shekiblu a Torah also as a Mishkan B'Chilav Zachlis Yachis Achar Mishkan families to their father's houses. Shis Yachsu Achar Mishpachos Avihem, that their yichus, their pedigree goes after their patriarchal houses. Zosuas Rosh B'nai Israel. That's the meaning of lift up the heads of the children of Israel. Umi Lashon is Nasus. I can't read what it says there. Su'u means to lift up. V'harama, it means something that's uplifted. L'mishbachosam, according to their family's home, their families. L'veis avosam, of their patriarchal houses. Hainu shezochar acher kabbalas haTorah v'siyas hamishkan keilv lisiaches acher avihem. That it means that they were worthy after receiving the Torah and making the tabernacle and all the vessels of the tabernacle to have their ancestry be traced after their fathers. Let's do another one. Kashetziva Hashem es Moshe v'Yifkadei Bemidbar Sinai, as the Lord commanded Moses, and he counted them in the wilderness of Sinai. What's the next verse? So Numbers chapter 1 verse 19. Yesh l'dakdek. One could look at this very carefully. Havilei l'meimar v'Yifkadei Bemidbar Sinai. It could have said, and he counted them in the wilderness of Sinai, Kasher Tziva Hashem es Moshe, as the Lord commanded Moses. Why does it say first, as the Lord commanded Moses, and he counted them in the wilderness of Sinai? That doesn't really make sense grammatically from our mere human level. And of course, when something is like that, this is the teaching that we have all throughout Jewish homiletics, and certainly in Hasidic homiletics, is that there's a lesson that it's that the homily isn't just something that's cute, it's a bon mot, it's something fun, it's something entertaining, but rather it's necessary to make a homiletical interpretation of some sort. Now you could argue what that interpretation is, or you could have multiple homilies and they could all be valid, but the point is that and it's something that you don't always notice in English, because sometimes the English translations are like, well, that doesn't make sense, let's just translate it in the way that makes sense. But then you're missing out on the word for word meaning of the scripture. So Manira, it appears like this: behold, the blessed Lord gave the Torah, the law, to the Israelites, v'nishmas Yisrael hem gufa Torah, and the body of the Torah is the Jewish soul, or the Jewish souls are the body of the Torah. The Israelite souls are the body of the Torah. Ki Yisrael hem shishim riboy oisius la Torah. Homiletically, we say that the word Yisrael, Israel, stands for that there are 600,000 letters in the Torah, even though it's really closer to half of that. But that's neither here nor there. That this is talking on a homiletical level and on an archetypical level. And you could say there's the white fire and the black fire. There's the visible letters, the invisible letters, and that's what it means. There's 600,000 when there's actually 300,000. There's 300,000 black letters, the letters we can see, but then there's also the invisible white letters, whatever that means. Obviously, it's an archetype. So, Nimsi Yisrael and Torah, and the archetype is this homily that the Israelites are the Torah. And again, this very famous homily that each and every Israelite, each and every Jew, is a letter in the Torah. And we say if one letter in the Torah is missing, the whole Torah is possible. This goes back to the whole machlokus that is very popular now on the internet, right, between Rabbi Manis Friedman and Yossi Mizrahi and Yaron Ruvain and those chevra, and I wish them all well, and I disagree with all of them. To be honest, I think the real answer is Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, whereas both of them are like, so insistent on my way or the highway. This is one thing why I prefer Satmar to all of these other groups. Satmar Rav used to say, Zechusi L'Leinim Kol Somein, that all the Rebbes say everybody else is wrong and only I'm right. He says, the Visions Rebbe says this, Belzer Rebbe says this, Square Rebbe says this, Lubavitch Rebbe. They all say everyone else is wrong and only I'm right. And Satmar Rav said, I agree, everyone else is wrong and I'm also wrong. And this insistence that, and he was very careful when talking about any Ben Torah. He would never he wouldn't use the term like apikoros. When talking about, he would say, right? He would say that there's religious people who are drawn after these heretics but he would not call a fellow Shomer Shabbos Jew a heretic, chas v'shalom, someone who believes in Gimel Ikrim. And that's why I see often, really, in many ways, the Satmar community is more tolerant of other views, because, meaning the modern Orthodox world will see a big threat from, let's say, conservative Judaism or open Orthodoxy. So the story goes, it's the same community, Williamsburg community. No, was it even from? No, it was. I think from the Satmar community, yeah, Menachem Stark, Satmar. So Avi Weiss, Zolgazun Sein, and Rabbi Avi Weiss and Rabbi Yosef Potaskin, Joe Potasnik rather. Sorry, they went to be Menachem Ovel by the Stark family. And so one is open Orthodox. He's the king of the open Orthodox, Rabbi Weiss, right? And the other one is someone who also learned in YU and ostensibly is Orthodox, but works as a conservative rabbi. And but both Chashvin, who I've met both of them, I have respect for both of them. Might not agree with them. Certainly, I don't agree with their Zionism, but they're Chashvin, and they were asking, where do I get on the subway, to get back home? And there was someone there, one of the Gaboyim from Spinker Rebbe, someone said, Chas v'sholom, two Choshev Rabbonim like you are going to sit on the subway, I'll drive you home, right? So Rabbi Potasnik lives in Brooklyn. It was very easy to drive him home. Rabbi Weiss lives in the Bronx, and he drove him all the way home to the Bronx, because that is, because there's no threat there, basically. So I don't know how I got to this from there. But the point is that, whereas if the standard YU people today, and certainly the right-wing YU people, I know I don't want to speak against someone who's already nifter, but someone from that world, from the more right-wing YU world, who left YU, I'm not going to say it was more, but Rabbi Weiss came to visit, came to a bris, and he went to give shalom to somebody who, and they were contemporaries. I think they were, in yeshiva, might have even been roommates at a certain point or something. And this is someone who already is an Olam Emes, and I respect that he was standing true to his ideas. Someone who's influenced a lot by the yeshivish world and the Hasidic world also, but who learned in YU, and a tremendous Talmid Chacham, someone who I have the utmost love and respect for, but he refused to even look. He can't look of Bnei Rasha. He wouldn't even look at Rabbi Weiss. And that's, again, everybody has their own derech. By the tzaddikim, you had Reb Nachman Breslover, who would sit with atheists and play chess with them, and you had Reb Baruch Meshbitzer, who didn't have, he was more Midas Gvura. They're both holy derechim, and that's the point, is that it's not just one derech. So, and that's why what I'm saying is that, for even in the nice guy way that who's I heist there, Rabbi Friedman took his own side, that with a nice smile and Hadras Ponim, he's saying God needs you, and to him it's like fear to say verkehrt, and then the more rough around the edges Israeli Sabra way, which I don't know how much Ziskite there is in Irvinig on these Yugalite, but Mizrahi and Ruvain. So there's insight. I wish them only well. I know they don't like me, but I only wish them well, and I recognize them as being Choshev Yidden also. But Sof Kol Sof, their whole thing is that this is kfira, this is apikorsis, that these are heretics, and they have their heretics list, and I made the heretics list, and my wife was like, "Oh, you're only number 17 on the heretics list. You gotta up your game a little bit on the list of the Erev Rav heretics, especially when it's my Rebbe who are on that list, or Moshe Weinberger's on the list, who was my Rebbe in high school, and so forth." So anyway, we'll go weiter. And how can we answer this? Is that in the rubric of how Hashem created the world, just like the halacha is homiletically, right? Is that if one letter is missing from a Sefer Torah is possible. So Zal Bazach, in the rubric of this world, Rabbi Friedman is correct, right? That if one letter is missing, so the whole Sefer Torah is possible. And so in that way, do you want to say that God needs you or the world needs you? Meaning that, because God has no needs. So, meaning the world that God created needs you. And so you want to say that as God needs you. I'm sorry. You want to say that as God needs you, that's how you want to teach it. All right. Obviously, the reason why Rabbi Ruvain and Rabbi Mizrahi are offended by that is because God doesn't need anything, right? And so, but they're talking in his essence, and Rabbi Friedman is talking in practical matters, And it's like one of my Rebbe, who I had the chus of hearing a live shir last night from Rabbi Bar Tzadok, Zal Gesundsein. I should be a little bit more involved there. So Rabbi Bar Tzadok, Zal Gesundsein, he says some people in religion are too heavenly minded to be any earthly good. Right? So what Rabbi Friedman is saying is on the earthly level. Right? And what Rabbi Mizrahi and Rabbi Ruvain are saying is on the heavenly level. And the Berditch V'Rav, there's a Torah that I like to share it's Chaser actually, that talks about that, about Berach Hafru Asarim, and that maybe sometimes it's not best to look at the big picture. Anyway, I want to get to the mikveh, and so I'm almost to Scranton now, so I've got to cut this short. So let's keep learning. So anyway, so we see that every Jew is a letter in the Torah. So we see that when Moses counted the Israelites, Lamed as a Torah, he was learning Torah because he was learning the Jews are the Torah. So when you count the Jews, and you counting the Jews means also to getting to know them and so forth, he was learning the Torah because the Jews are the Torah. And that's what's hinted to as the Lord commanded Moses. The hint here is that which the Lord commanded Moses, right? That God commanded the Torah, which God commanded Moses, right? That's what it means that he counted the Jews. He counted the Israelites, right? They weren't Jews yet, or Israelites. It's the same thing, essentially, for the purpose of our homily here. For this reason, and that's the reason why it appears this was written, do not count the Levites, the tribe of Levi. You should not count and not lift up among the children of Israel. Because the Israelites, the 12 tribes excluding Levi, represent the archetype of the scripture, of the written Torah. But the Levites represent the archetype of the oral Torah. And that's why it says by the Levium, by the mouth of the Lord they are counted, meaning that it's the oral Torah. Very interesting homily there. I don't usually like to do two because it soon goes long and then there isn't another one. So maybe we could quickly go through this if I don't darshan too much on it. Achas mati Levi loisifko. So back to this. Don't count the Levites. Misoch b'nei Israel. It's the children of Israel. Book of Numbers, chapter 1, verse 49. Torah ramach mitzvahs asim shisa mitzvahs lo saseh oros. That the 613 commandments, which consist of 248 positive commandments and 248 thou shalts, and the 365 negative commandments, the 365 thou shalt nots, are lights. They're luminaries. The tabernacle is that which the lights, the spiritual lights, are constricted into the tabernacle. The Israelites are also the lights of the Torah, because every Israelite is a letter of the Torah. Klalhu, and the general rule is like this: just as there are 248 physical limbs and 365 physical material sinews. We talked about this last week. Similarly, there are 613 intellectual lights, luminaries, in the worship of the blessed Creator. In the worship of the Creator, and those are called the spiritual limbs, right? When we learned last week from the Maranayim. And God, the blessed Creator, is constantly pouring down His influence into the intellectual realm. There are certain people who, however, they're only connected to the intellectual aspect. So some people are really, they're materialistic. They only see the intellectual, the emotional aspect of it, and then that's the rationalist approach. But then there's the more emotionalist approach that recognizes, where does this level of intelligence derive from? It derives from the divine. Maris Navi. That's what is the vision of the prophets. Which is today called the prophet. In earlier times was called the seer. That's 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 9. This is what's hinted to here. The Maisa Menorah Kamara Shera Hashem Moshe, King also says a menorah. Then when it comes to the menorah, the candelabrum, it's as it, according to the vision that the Lord showed Moses, thus did he make the menorah. It doesn't say that by the work of the tabernacle, because the tabernacle represents that archetype of intelligence, of the intellect. Menorah is Rios Shefa, whereas the menorah, which is a lamp, that represents seeing the divine energy that's coming down. Understanding that the divine energy is that energy is of a divine origin, and it's not merely an intellectual or rational issue, even though there is, of course, the intellect and the rationalism in it. But the point is that it's, where does it come from? That it comes from
in 1,000 feet, merge onto I-81 North.
Into the intellect. And that's what it says, according to the vision that the Lord.
In 400 feet,
Moses.
Turn right onto Meadow Avenue. At the light, turn right.
I know where I'm going. Moses saw how this divine energy came from the most highest supernal places onto the intellect. And that's why he did not count the Levites among the Israelites, because here this archetypical understanding in this homily is that the archetype that the Israelites, the 12 tribes excluding Levi, represent the intellectual luminaries, lights. But the Levites come from a more emotional place that's above the rational realm, and that comes from the highest levels and enters into the intellect, right? And that's why I think it's next week's Parsha, by the purification of the Levites in the book of Numbers, chapter 8, verse 7. It's written that it's written that, and they put a razor over all of their flesh, and because hairs are like a garment. And the Levites are on a supernal level that they have there's nothing